Welcome to the Fayetteville Fire Podcast, where we talk all things fire-related, safety tips, and things that are happening in our can-do city. I'm Don Cheetah, Captain Community Risk Reduction of Fayetteville Fire Department, and I'll be your host for today's podcast. Today we're going to be talking about technical rescue and our USAR team, Urban Search and Rescue Team. First, did you know in 2019 that 149 people went to the emergency room for fireworks-related injuries in North Carolina? We're going to talk about that more later in our safety message of the month. So let's get into technical rescue and USAR. Our guests today are Assistant Chief Vince Lewis and Battalion Chief Robert Bob Bowers of the Fayetteville Fire Department. They're both part of our Urban Search and Rescue Team. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good to be here.
So we're talking technical rescue and urban search and rescue, two different animals, correct?
Sorta
And kinda?
Sorta, kinda. They're kind of married indirectly. They have the same disciplines, but we can get called to do just about anything USAR-wise. USAR is more mutual aid. Technical rescue is more what we do in the city.
Okay.
We do have USAR deployments in the city, hurricanes, but usually as a task force, we're deployed outside of Cumberland County.
Okay, and you say task force.
We had 11 back in 2004. That's when the whole USAR system started in North Carolina. We had 11 teams going from Swain County in the mountains to New Hanover County, Wilmington on the coast. About 2009-10, we dropped 4 teams. So now we're down to 7. There's 7 state USAR teams.
Okay, so that's a task force.
That's a task force.
So we got 7 task force teams in the state. Kind of like last month we were talking about regional response teams with hazmat. Same concept.
Same concept.
Very similar, yeah.
Just urban search and rescue instead of hazmat, obviously. So when did Fayetteville's team form?
We started in 2004. That was our first planning meetings. We were really, at the time, the chief then, we had to talk him into doing it because we had a commitment to the state with the RRT hazmat program, and he didn't think at the time that we had enough capabilities to perform 2 simultaneous missions. So we reached out to the county and the police department, and we kind of combined forces and made it happen. And so 2006 was our first call or deployment. We had everything in place at 2006, so we've been going ever since 2006. But 2004 is when we organized.
You know, the emergency response world changed a lot in 2005 when Katrina hit Louisiana area, and that was really what showed that the state of North Carolina that they needed to organize urban search and rescue teams that can respond statewide and try to meet the needs. So Katrina in 2005 really changed everything, and that's what really made the push in 2006 for them to form up the 11 teams. But like Chief Bowers said, since then they've taken it down to 7 teams. And Fayetteville hosts Task Force 9, North Carolina Task Force 9.
And you say 2004 is when it kind of got kicked off. That, if everybody remembers, that was kind of the time frame of the Big Bang annexation. So our fire department grew exponentially from May, June of 2004 until July and beyond. And if I remember correct, it was after the annexation.
That's where we got the people. That's where we got the boots on the ground. So that's when the fire chief said, "Yeah, we can do it."
Right. That makes sense. It all ties in, right?
Yeah, it all comes together.
So tell me about the makeup of the team. You know, how many members do we got? Different, specialties, so to speak. I know, different disciplines, or is everybody cross-trained? How are these teams made up?
So our every team task force is made up a little bit differently. Our team is actually a combined team where we have 3 different agencies involved. Fayetteville Fire Department is the host agency, and we have the majority of the personnel. We also house all the equipment. Joining us in 2004, 2005, the Fayetteville Police Department come in on it, and they brought more people because that was one of the things is being able to have enough people to support Fayetteville, but also be able to leave Fayetteville and help the state. So our police department got involved. We're actually the only task force in North Carolina that has law enforcement on it. And then also Cape Fear Valley EMS, we partnered up with them to bring in the medical side of things. So those three agencies have been working together in Task Force 9. Right now, there's like 58 members total that make up the team. Majority of them are from the fire department. They're all have to get the baseline training, which is North Carolina Technical Rescuer certifications, and then they go to a USAR school for structural collapse, which is held in Charlotte, and that's kind of the baseline of it. Within our team, though, there's all different types of jobs. So the team itself is managed by a program manager. That's myself. Then within that team, there's task force leaders. Chief Bowers is one of them, who are tasked with kind of leading on the deployments. Then underneath them, there's different levels of supervision and specialties. There's people that specialize just strictly in doing some type of technical search. So if a building falls down, they're trained on how to use camera systems and listening systems to locate victims. There's some that are trained specifically in lifting heavy objects, working with cranes to move debris. There are some that are very specific just to, because we're talking about USAR, that's an all hazards environment. So that means you have to be prepared for pretty much anything that occurs. So we have people that are really just into the swift water rescue side of things, which is a big part of our task force and our USAR responses. Again, post Katrina, it was recognized that USAR teams needed to be well versed and equipped in swift water rescue because of the urban environment and urban flooding, which was something they hadn't really dealt with prior to Katrina. And so we've made a big push in that, and especially post Hurricane Matthew in 2016. When Matthew come through, it really surprised the state of North Carolina because we hadn't had a hurricane that hit an urban area in a long time, and unfortunately it comes straight in and hit Fayetteville, and it showed that the state needed to up the capabilities for swift water responses. We did very well internally. We managed to make, I think, over 1,000 rescues in 12 hours, utilizing our equipment, our training, which was pretty significant. But and we also we had people from all around the country that came in to assist, but that was kind of later on in the event. But yeah, so swift water is really turning into the big discipline within the USAR programs now.
Right, and you look on the news and everything. Obviously, all the hurricanes come through. There's always devastating flooding, especially slow-moving hurricanes. But building collapses and things like that aren't as common, so to speak. Most of your larger structures are built to withstand the winds and everything, and not having complete building collapses and stuff like that.
And as they continue to grow, the urban areas, they keep putting concrete down, your cities are getting bigger and bigger. That's creating these flooding events. You can go back and look at the data, and it shows how rapidly the increase in urbanized flooding events that are occurring over the last 20 years. They're occurring faster just because there's less green space for the water to go to, and there's more people being impacted as a result. So
that water doesn't soak well into the concrete, does
it?
No.
So, you got all these capabilities and stuff. I'm sure there's a significant amount of training and certifications that get involved with this.
So, yeah, there is just baseline, the North Carolina Technical Rescuer certifications, what we would call be the basic certifications. You're looking at, 400 to 500 hours of training to learn, how to operate within certain rescue environments, to learn basic techniques. And that's before you start getting into really specialized stuff. Our most common response that would fall into that category is vehicle accidents where someone is trapped in the vehicle. That would be considered a baseline. But beyond that, you start getting into rope rescue and high angle rescues, confined spaces, people going into sewers or storm drains, trench collapse. Unfortunately, those occur quite frequently as well. And then the structural collapse and water. So yeah, there's a lot of training to get certified, but there's a whole lot more to keep it because you have to stay on top of all that stuff and keep those skills fresh.
And that's a lot to stay on. And going way back when I was on the hazmat team, I think it was 1 week for confined space and 1 week for trench. And it was just run through the community college. I understand now that this is actually a state certification that they've made out of these different capabilities.
Oh yeah, and they're, trench. Now that's what 40, 60 hours, something like that, and then the water side of it, because it has grown so much. There's boat operator classes beyond basic water rescue. Then you get into boat operator classes, and then you get into team leader classes on how to manage it all. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of training. We're fortunate in the fact that we have some good places to train around here. We've got good facilities to train at, and hopefully that just continues to get better and better also.
And you bring up facilities, not to get off point, but Fayetteville Tech, in conjunction with the Urban Search and Rescue Team, are building a pretty significant swiftwater rescue training facility.
Yeah. So they're building an indoor swiftwater facility to be the only one on this part of the East Coast. There's only a handful of them around the state or around the country. And once it gets complete, it's going to be really state of the art for practice and for training, because that's the one thing that's hard to simulate is swift water. If you got to have some place where the water's moving to really do it, and there's only certain places in North Carolina you can go to, most of them being in the western part up in the mountains. So this will give the opportunity to be able to train in that swift water, but do it so in a semi-safe environment. So
very cool, very cool. So we're talking about what are your most frequent types? So we'll get off USAR and deployments. We know a lot of that swiftwater rescue post hurricane or other significant events, tornadoes or whatnot. But just here in town, day in and out, what's the most frequent types of technical rescue calls that you get?
Automobile accidents, extrication would be subjects pinned in, that sort of thing, overturned vehicles. And then I would say water after that.
Or people that, rope rescues, low angle, not necessarily in a high angle environment, but subjects that fall down into, cliffs or canyons or ditches, areas like that. You have to use a rope system to get them back up. Those are fairly frequent as well.
And just tell us, for our listeners, we're talking about high angle versus low angle. Talk about the differences between them.
Low angle is, I call them slope evacs. So if you're driving down 295 and you run off the side of the road, that slope that goes down, it's usually between 50 degrees, 60 degrees, back to about 30 degrees, somewhere in there. And then anything past 60 is considered high angle rescue. So if you put your thumb out in an L, you can that's 45 and 90 and 0 and all that. You can count them off. But a high angle would be the dogwood, the 10-story dogwood building. That would definitely be a high angle rescue. It's straight vertical drops. We can usually walk up a slope, so it's just the ropes that we deploy are more for safety than anything, and patient safety. Versus if it's going down the side of the dogwood or the old Wachovia building, that's life or death.
So you're getting up in the air there.
You're getting up in the air there. So that's the basic differences.
And like you said, our bread and butter, right? Everybody lives in Fayetteville. And I was, they can be a sunny afternoon and we'll get vehicle accidents.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. About 140 of them a month.
140 accidents a month. Wow.
Yeah, that we get called to.
And when we're talking about extrication and stuff in vehicle accidents, obviously we're talking about high mechanism of injury, high impacts, which a lot of our corridors are 45, which means 55, 60.
Yeah. A lot of motorcycle accidents occur in the city.
Yeah. So, with the accidents we talked about USAR, do you just deploy out of one station? On the technical rescues within the city, you just have one fire station, one team, one USAR team, one technical rescue team, or how's it?
Yeah, we get called by the state usually as a Type 3 USAR team, which is we commit about 35 people downrange. We can get called as a swiftwater team. We usually roll out of here as an all hazards. So our last deployment was to Haywood County back in September. and it was for raining / possible mudslides. So we took our water assets and we took our USAR assets because the county that we went to serve was worried about the week before they had a lot of rain, so all their soil was ready to go, so it didn't take much, so they were worried about mudslides and houses, so we went up there as an all hazards team.
Okay.
So,
But within the city of Fayetteville on an everyday basis, we have two heavy rescue companies that are staffed. One is at Station 14 across from Fayetteville State, and the other one is at Station 11 out near Lake Rim. And for anything that's within the city, that's where we pull from. So depending on the size and complexity of the event, and maybe one of those heavy rescues go along with other fire units, or we may bring them both together, in the case of a trench rescue or something like that.
Okay. So that's a frequent call. Let's talk about some crazy calls.
So USAR-wise, it was probably one of our first calls. We went to Pimlico County, and all the power was out in the county. And if you know, Pimlico was about as rural as you can get in North Carolina, and it was on the coast. We set up our base of operations, and we turned our generators on, and it lit up this big area, and it was like Field of Dreams, where people were literally walking out of the pine trees and walking towards the light. And it was just a crazy situation to see all those people, and they needed help. They needed, medical attention, and they just needed a lot of information, like, hey, my house is gone. Where do I go get help? But it was just something when we flipped the switch on, and it was like flies being drawn to the light. And so that was kind of a crazy call. So,
and I could relate to that because I was working a dozen or so years ago when we had the tornadoes come through town.
That was a crazy call. I mean that was something.
We were one of the second engine companies on Yakin Road, and I just remember pulling up, and everybody was just
walking out of
the neighborhoods, looked like zombies, kind of like what just happened
onto Riley Road, because
yeah.
that's all they knew was to come to Riley Road,
or Yakin Road, and that other side too.
The other side,
what happened?
Mm-hmm.
So what about difficult? I know all the aspects of USAR and technical rescue. That's why it's technical are difficult. But what are some of the real, or one particular or a few particular calls that really stand out as tested all your ability and all your knowledge? And
we were deployed to Bertie County in the town of Windsor, and we got there about 2:00 in the morning, and I was met by the chairman of the county commissioners, and boy, I'm so glad you're here, blah blah blah, that sort of thing. And he took me in and showed me a map, and he pointed and he said, I need the entire downtown of Windsor, the town of Windsor, to evacuate it. And we showed up with, it was actually not a USAR deployment for us, it was a water rescue deployment. So all we had was our water stuff. We didn't have any USAR stuff. And we didn't have the right amount of people. So when we got there and we did our assessment, that involved evacuating a nursing facility that was very challenging. But it kind of took us back because we were kind of understaffed, and it took a while to get resources and, government help. And then, okay, we got you. And then it just took a long time to get spun up, and you have a lot of people looking at you for help. Like, hey, we called you to do something. And now we don't have the resources here to do it. And it's kind of hard to tell people that. But we got a lot of kudos for that. So a lot of county commissioners writing letters, and the mayor of Windsor, wrote a nice attaboy to our mayor, thanking us for resources and assistance and all that. So what we do around the state goes a long way, because we have Fayetteville, Cumberland County splattered all over our equipment, so they know who's coming to help them. So, but that was a call that was probably our most difficult call as far as resources and knowledge, and when you're tasked to evacuate the whole downtown of a small town. But it was about 200 people that we had to get across swift water. So that was the other thing.
Yeah, because that town was kind of cut off.
Yeah,
Wasn't
it was absolutely cut off, and those people had nowhere to go. We had to go get them, or they could have got up on the roofs, but they would have been in bad shape.
Wow.
So,
Chief, anything?
I think probably the two most taxing as far as events that we've seen has been the tornadoes of 2011, just because of how widespread the damage was, and how we had to pull all the resources from the fire department together. We had to call back all our USAR teams in, but then also we weren't able to get much help from outside because it was they were dealing with tornadoes all over. It wasn't just our community. So that really, was a multi-day event, but that really probably taxed us about as far as we can.
At the beginning, we didn't realize the magnitude of it. So from a USAR standpoint, we got calls from the state because Charlotte was coming. Charlotte Fire Department Task Force 3 was coming to help us, and we got a phone call from the state, and they needed to go to Sanford. So we didn't know the magnitude at that time of that tornado, and so we said, yeah, sure, go ahead. And that was the wrong call on our part, because there was parts of the city that needed help and we couldn't get help to.
Yeah, and that was a challenge. I mean, I was working that day, and even before we were able to get all the equipment in and your team in place, just engine companies and truck companies just trying to go house to house, and obviously very limited, because when it comes to a lot of structural collapse, which there was a lot of structural collapse, or very limited on the operations side of what they could do. So, yeah, that was also a challenging day.
And probably the other big one would be Hurricane Matthew. Just because of the widespread flooding. It cut off the city in a lot of areas. It isolated some spots that were almost like islands within the city. And then the widespread damage down to even, it took out the water system in parts of Fayetteville where there was no municipal water service. And and the days following, unfortunately there were some fires that created, issues because you just didn't have water. So Matthew was the other one, and how fast it happens. Now the flip side to like Matthew events is they're flash flooding events. So they spin up very quick, but they go away very quick too. So.
Yeah, and I think if I remember correctly, what added to Matthew is 1 week prior, we had a very significant rainfall overnight that night that had already washed out some bridges and roads and already saturated everything. So we talked about a few deployments out to the mountains, Berkeley County, but how about out of state or other big deployments as a task force?
So we've had one out of state deployment that I can remember, and that was Hurricane Harvey. And that was kind of a joint deployment where the different USAR teams throughout North Carolina come together and went to Texas to assist them with Hurricane Harvey. That was 2017. That's the only out-of-state one that I can remember. Going out of state's a little bit different than in-state responses. So out-of-state responses into the federal system has a whole different type of system. It doesn't happen often.
Yeah, and it takes the governor to sign off on that for us to leave the state, because at the time another hurricane was sort of kind of coming our way. So really the governor rolled the dice and let us go. And we sent about 120 people down there. So it was every task force had representation down there.
So, when you say every task force, from
all seven.
Okay, all seven from the state.
Of some, it could have been 20 people to 50 people. So we had representation from every task force down there.
And this all works through state emergency management, or works up through FEMA, and we talk about state task force, but there's also like nationally a task force organization that works.
Yeah, so a state will request what we call an EMAC, and that's just basically a bidding process, and North Carolina says, hey, we can send X amount of people for X amount of dollars. And the other state says, okay, that's good, send them. So that's how that works.
Very good, very good. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate you coming on the show today and talking about that, and good luck to you in the future. We'll hope to have you back, all right?
All right, we
Glad to be
appreciate it.
here.
Thank you.
Our safety tip this month is fireworks safety. As we go into the 4th of July weekend coming up, I want you to know more than 9,000 people nationwide were treated for firework-related injuries in the last year, most of them occurring during the 4th of July weekend. Children under the age of 5 account for more than half of the estimated injuries. A lot of this is attributed to handheld sparklers. Did you know they can have temperatures of 1,200 to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit? Too much heat for a child to be holding. Most of your emergency room injuries also had the other half have to do with extremities, hands, fingers, or legs, pieces missing. North Carolina state law says exploding and projectile type fireworks are illegal in North Carolina. So we ask you this 4th of July weekend to leave it to the experts. Go out and watch the fireworks show and enjoy. Thank you for joining us on the Fayetteville Fire Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to Radio Fayetteville on your favorite streaming platform to listen to all our podcasts. Next time, we're going to talk about recruitment and retention. Until then, be safe.